the average reaction to COVID is to how do we get back to where we were before? And that is really wrong. It's not understanding evolution and how things change at all. A lot of people are very uncomfortable with change, but as entrepreneurs, you've got to be really change agents.
Welcome to The Visionary Entrepreneur. My name is Dane Dunlap.
And I'm Nicholas Shimamesi.
This is a podcast where we interview entrepreneurs about their story and visions for the future. We're here to create a space to network and to learn from each other's experiences. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Visionary Entrepreneur. Today we have a special guest. He is a serial entrepreneur as well as a VC general partner now. He has started 4 different companies, 3 of which have gone public, 1 of which was acquired. Now working for Matrix Partners. He works a lot with SaaS companies. And for those of you who don't know what SaaS is, it is software as a service, mostly based in the subscription model. So he has a lot of experience working with entrepreneurs, working with startups, and he has a blog now that's extremely successful. It's called For Entrepreneurs. It is rated number 2 by Forbes for websites for entrepreneurs. So very impressive guest, David Skok. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to be here, and happy to see if we can help.
I believe you majored in computer science in university, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So
exactly.
One of the questions I had was, in this day and age with, the ever evolving technology, and you see a lot of startups and entrepreneurs, and the founders are, have tech backgrounds. Do you think that it is necessary in this day and age to be a tech guy, to know how to program, or at least, in what sense do you think you need that kind of background in order to be a successful entrepreneur?
So we believe that based on our experience, you do need to have one founder who is technically and product focused if you're going to be in the tech startup world. And the reason for that is that it is all about being able to produce a great product, ultimately speaking. And if you are merely the business person and you're trying to get that product built without that tech founder, there's just too much of the business, too many important aspects of the business that are outside of your domain expertise that are super important that you don't know about and you don't have really enough input and control on. And trying to hire those people, I've seen many startups that start off with maybe a Ukrainian team or a local team that they hire to get the product built. That's just not a good model at all. That means you've outsourced one of the most core competencies in the entire company to some third party. And investors are smart enough to recognize all those core competencies need to exist inside the company. So if you guys are perhaps finance or majors and you're really keen to become entrepreneurs, the good news for you is that the average product person who comes from an engineering background is not typically very good at the business side of the house. Right. And even if they were good at it, there's so much to do that getting the product right, that they need another person there. So the best founding teams that we like to see is that there's one business person who's particularly good at selling and figuring out this go-to-market motion. And there's another one who's really going to focus on the product and the engineering, the product building, and they partner together and they create the team. But if we see a team, once in a while we get this wrong, and I'll give you the worst example of a business judgment that we got wrong was Pinterest. We met the Pinterest team and they did not have a technical member in that team. So we passed on that assessment. And of course, look at ourselves, we made a mistake. But I will tell you that is the exception, not the rule. And it's probably the exception that proves the rule, because when we look at all the other companies passed on because they didn't have a technical founder, that is proven to be the smart decision in most cases.
So if I could ask, for someone like Nick and I know you mentioned, not really having the tech background, you mentioned partnering with someone. Do you still think it's valuable to learn, the basics of programming, even though that, you won't be your expertise by any ways? Or do you think it's, more beneficial to just focus on your strengths as a salesperson or as more of a business person?
You do not need to learn programming, but I do think if you can spend a month on a brief Python course or whatever it is, just to figure out how to manage data a little bit better,
right? Just
understanding what it is and how it works and what the limitations are is going to be incredibly valuable for you. I meet a lot of kids that in various different stages of their high school career, and they're trying to figure out what should they do next. And I always tell them, look, the two absolute best things you can do if you have the right kind of brain for this is either study computer science or, strangely enough, go and study statistics. Now, statistics seem like the most boring and old, but it turns out statistics is at the heart of artificial intelligence and at the heart of how we do machine learning and all of these clever decision-making things that are not based on absolute concrete data, but more based on probabilistic concepts and things like that. So.
Because I have that serious problem. I took a few Python classes in university. I did business technology in my undergrad, and I almost wanted to do a data analytics master's. And I went the finance route, and I find with my limited experience in programming, I'm pretty useless when it comes to programming stuff. So I tend to think, is it beneficial to have that little bit, or, because right now I don't think I could use my programming skills to do much, even though I've had, some limited experience. So, but, I think that's a good move to focus on your strengths.
Yeah. And your strengths that you guys want to focus on are the sorts of things we've been talking about here, which is how can you take this, this product concept and do what typically technical founders do very poorly, which is to figure out, okay, what's the market for this? Who's going to buy this? Why are they going to buy this? What language do they want to have described them? What pricing should we use for this thing? What messaging should we use? All of these are the business concepts. And the more you guys can be great at doing that, recognizing the funnel and how, when you have a funnel, it's governed by this very simplistic math that's so interesting, which is the number of things that you pour in the top of the funnel, leads that you pour in the top, multiplied by that conversion rate of the funnel, that equals the output of the funnel. So what can you do to change the conversion rate of the different steps? If you can change the number of people hitting your website and you only have 2% of them signing up for your free trial, you change that to 3%. That's a 50% increase in the output of your funnel. So, being able to do that, being able to understand that is unbelievably valuable in a startup, and just as powerful as a contribution as being able to bring in the programming, create the product in the first place.
Something we ask all our guests on this podcast is the vision for the future. So what is your vision for the future of tech or AI or whatever, our society?
It was really to try to find the opportunities that you might see as significant going forward. If you were to be in our position, what do you think the opportunities are?
Right. Well, I do think, I might just whip you through a presentation that I'm working on. This is in draft form right now. So again, I apologize. I'm going to jump into some slides for you here. So this is basically, is this sharing something which says there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen? Okay, perfect. So we're in the middle of something that I think is, even for older people, it's the biggest life-changing event most of us will have ever witnessed in our time at all. And I put up strong things here, like I think this could be equivalent to a world war in terms of the impact it has on the global power structure that we have. And I think also what's happening here is we're moving from everything having to be done with physical transactions like signatures and getting documents notarized and purchasing in a store to a incredible acceleration of what was going on anyway, but not going on as fast as pace, which is to a digital way of doing business here. And I think of that as being, it's the Industrial Revolution happening in 2 months. And the net result of this is that there are some really big winners and losers in this. And the way I've personally gone about studying this is I start off by thinking about, okay, what does epidemiology teach me? What's the global impact going to be? Then what's the macroeconomics going to look like? What's the tech industry impact? And then what does my impact on myself look like here? And I'm not going to bother you with the epidemiology questions that are on this slide here. If anybody's interested, I can post this stuff later on. But this is interesting for you here, because I do think the world is changing incredibly rapidly. And where change happens, that's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs. And recognizing this change in what's going on shows you where the opportunities are. So, we're obviously moving from the way things used to work. Office was the default place that we would work. I think remote is going to become the default way that people will work. Coming out of this, a lot of companies are realizing, Twitter, you hear Facebook, you hear talking about the fact they're going remote first. And so the office will become a place which you visit occasionally for connection and community and ecosystem, but not for really getting work done there. You already talked about the shift from physical to digital. I think personally that we've had this big move towards cities. I suspect there's a chance that we actually reverse that and we go back to people wanting to, enjoy countryside and potentially be in suburbs, because cities are too dense and spread diseases quickly. So
interesting.
that may happen. You get this, we used to worry about what clothing we bought to go into the office and looking smart. Now it matters more is I've actually invested in a really good camera here. I hope my image appears in good shape.
It's coming out fantastic.
Yeah. So you care about good lighting, a good microphone, a good webcam, and a decent background behind you. People were getting into the point of tech backlash, and now we're seeing technology as the lifeline that's helping us all stay connected and do it well. We're seeing a rapid movement to cloud and SaaS, which I'll show you in a future slide there. So this is important to recognize. Behind the stock market, which people have been shocked as to how well it's doing, actually split into extreme winners and extreme losers. Amazon, Shopify, Datadog, Zoom, all the SaaS stocks, every one of them has done unbelievably well here. But if you look at the other companies that are in the travel, oil, retail,
more
restaurant sectors, they have not done well. Their bounce back is pretty low at this point in time here. And so this is a very dangerous phenomenon. And in fact, one of the things that you see on my previous slide that I had here is that I predicted, and this is I wrote this slide before we had the problems that have just come up here, social unrest, because it strikes me that we're going to a period where we're going to have high unemployment, and high unemployment with a recession going on is a formula for a very unstable society. And so we're going to see a lot of fighting over where the wealth is and desire to redistribute wealth. And if it's done with the kind of split country that we have at the moment, I think that's super dangerous, because we really need a unifying of this country and everybody agreeing that capitalism still works, but it needs to be modified in ways to distribute wealth more effectively and distribute opportunities more effectively than it has done. So that I think is very dangerous. But then let's just go further to some of the other things here going on. What's happened in the tech world is work from home. When companies were forced to suddenly work from home, it was really easy if all the tools they were using were Gmail, Salesforce. But if they were using on-premise systems, you had to now set up a VPN, a virtual private network, between your home computer and the office. And I talked to a few people who had to do that. And those systems are awful. They're so clunky. You're trying to run some kind of a mainframe screen file or whatever it was. So those people are really in trouble. And secondly, suddenly you get a change in demand, a spike. And if your business was in the cloud using Amazon Web Services, you could simply scale down how much infrastructure you were using. But if you had your own data center, you were stuck with a bunch of fixed costs, and you couldn't scale up quickly. If you had a sudden boost like Zoom suddenly had a massive increase in the number of users, it was able to handle it because it was all cloud-based. Yeah. So, and we talked about physical to digital. So this is one thing that's happening right now, is you can see planned cloud usage slightly higher is the light green. 31% of companies plan to increase their cloud usage more than they had previously planned because of COVID. And 26% will do significantly higher cloud usage. So this move to cloud is rapidly accelerating. That's why those stocks that are doing so well are actually now doing better than they were previously. I think everybody knows that Zoom is one example of that, but Shopify another a great example of that. And many other cloud stocks, the same thing there. So that's an interesting thing to notice. So I think another way of looking at this is, you've got a black swan event that's just happened here. Right now, we're in the impact phase where we're all seeing this as just smashing things that exist and worked before. We're about to enter into the recovery phase, but when we're out of the recovery phase, things won't be the same as before, and things will get reinvented in a new way. And as much as you're able to, I've got this crappy list of reinvention ideas, but really, as entrepreneurs, this is where your great thinking wants to come, which is how will this world get reinvented? So I've given you some examples here. Global supply chains, we had a real mode of saying, we will just buy things from the cheapest place possible. I think people are realizing that doesn't work very well in this kind of an environment, and we need to become self-sufficient. So we're going to move our production as much as possible into America and keep it there, so we're not as reliant on other people there. I think expensive colleges are in trouble. People who wants to sign up for a college next year when you're not going to have a campus? You want to pay $100,000 a year for webinars?
So
Yeah.
true.
It's not going to
So
work.
true.
So I think a lot of colleges, the Ivies will still last, and the really strong colleges, but a lot of colleges won't. And the fact that you can't get a job easily in an environment like this after you've graduated from college, I think somebody has to come up with a better way of doing higher education. So that's one example. I think vacations, a lot of people won't travel. They're going to be worried about traveling to places where there may be risk of infection. So you could imagine setting up a business where you create a drone trip around amazing locations, but the drone is very carefully controlled. It cannot fly into dangerous spaces. It can always, it's restricted to only flying in certain areas. But you give the tourist the ability to log into this website, don a 3D VR headset. The drone's got, stereo cameras on it. And I, as the tourist, can now control this drone and move it around this amazing, it might not be an aerial drone. It could be a walking drone that takes you on a tour of the Louvre Museum or, some incredible destination. It could even be an underwater drone. So I think that's sort of an
tourism.
Example. Post-COVID tourism, yeah. Now, obviously, work is going to get reinvented in the non-physical. So, what we do with face-to-face management and observing how people are performing has to become remote and measured remotely. How will we do recruiting, which is very much an in-person thing then, onboarding? All the collaboration stuff is already being tackled. How do you make that better? I don't think Zoom is the last word in how things will get done. That it works for certain kinds of meetings, but not for asynchronous types of things there. And the long term, I do believe that while we're all so used to the smartphone as being the be-all and end-all device, we are definitely not finished with the smartphone. I think the next step is you're going to put on a set of augmented reality glasses. They're going to have a laser that sits in the corner of the glass that paints an image on the back of your retina. And you will use a input technology, which we backed a company that was called Control Labs that recently got bought by Facebook. And it had this incredibly cool cuff that you put on your wrists. And the cuff was able to pick up the electrical signals that your brain was sending to your wrists. So you could type at a keyboard for about 10 minutes, and then you could take the keyboard away and you can type in the air, and it would still be able to produce the characters that your hand uses.
Wow.
You can imagine rotating a globe with your hands, or going through a filing cabinet with your hands, and you've got your AR glasses on, and you're sitting across from me. You don't, I can't tell what you're looking at, but you're actually busy going through a filing folder, trying to find me to figure out some things on it. And then I think the next phase in that is that we go to machine interfaces where, and my partners always have a fit when I say this, but I'm actually one of the first people who'll be willing to do this. So you put a chip of some kind or another connected directly into your brain where it expands your memory. And the really cool thing about this, if you take this to the nth degree here, is you could be sitting as an expert surfer with a chip plugged into your brain, and you catch a big wave, and all of the sensations and visual things that you're capturing, you could transmit across the network in the brain, and I could be sitting in another country, 6,000 miles away, enjoying that surfing experience, even though I don't have any surfing skills, because we've got a neural cortex that's now interconnected across everybody's brains there.
Are you not afraid of something like that? Because I feel like a lot of people are afraid of putting something into your brain and sort of losing connection with nature and other human beings. That's a big discussion for another time, but I feel, I mean, I'm two-sided about that. In fact, I think it's cool, but I'm a little afraid.
Yeah, I think you're right to be afraid. My partners are all afraid. They all say I'm completely nuts, but I'm a very high risk-taking individual. I've taken huge risks throughout my life, and sometimes it doesn't do me well, but I'm just that way oriented. And I think there are a lot of people like me who will be the early pioneers of that, and we'll see and it's like all technology that we've come up with. It's going to have bad, negative downsides to it. I think it's the nature of progress and evolution.
Very cool.
Do you think that? I mean, it's kind of I'm kind of blown away a little bit. I'm in shock. You've laid out all these things that you think that the world is going. We've never had a response like that. Do you think that it's important for entrepreneurs to be constantly thinking about stuff like this, about what the future holds and what opportunities lie? Because maybe people don't do that enough. We've never had a response like that.
I think absolutely. I mean, in particular right now, the average reaction to COVID is to how do we get back to where we were before? And that is really wrong. It's not understanding evolution and how things change at all. A lot of people are very uncomfortable with change, but as entrepreneurs, you've got to be really change agents. And so if you have a company today, you know, what I'm recommending is you really go and rethink, what is your customers' real problems now? Have they altered and have their priorities changed? And what new opportunities have been created, and how could you adjust strategies? If you're an entrepreneur without a company, it's great in the sense that now all of a sudden there's a bunch of new opportunities that this change has created that were not there a short while ago. So this opens up great new opportunities for people that have the right kind of thinking. But yes, this is what entrepreneurialism is all about, is really being, you know, thinking on a scale of getting outside of, particularly getting outside of your very product-focused, product-centric way of thinking and becoming very buyer-centric and understanding what's going on with your buyer, how are they going to need to solve problems in the future, how do they think about life, and what can I do to connect those two things. So I think startups are about changes in technology and unmet need. So for example, let's say, you know, what's a great example here? So miniaturization allowed us to create the iPhone, but the iPhone took off because it met several unmet needs. So it met people's love of photography. So having a camera in your pocket all the time, combined with the network so you could shoot photos, that combination turned out to be an incredible need of a human in the social world. Who would have thought that sharing photos was such a gigantic business?
All the best ideas have come from combining two old ideas and creating a product that's more efficient for the user.
Yeah. Yes. But you know, if I'm an entrepreneur today, what I'd be doing is I'd be making a list of the interesting technologies, and in particular for me, AI is one of the highest level important new technologies that's emerging right now. And then I'd be thinking about what are the problem spaces that I'm personally close to, where I have some good domain expertise that allows me to kind of think about what could I use, you know, this new technology. So that's kind of the bridging of those two things is the sparking moment where ideas for startups come from typically.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary time that we're going through, but it also provides a lot of opportunities. I think it was Warren Buffett who had said, like, when there's blood in the streets, that's when there's opportunities. So I think that, you know, it's a scary time, but it's also, you know, a time where it's very interesting to think about where the world's going to be restructured in a few years. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well,
one thing that I know we're close to the end here that I just thought might be helpful for your readers to know where to go to if they're interested in some of the stuff that we've talked about here.
Definitely.
So let me stop sharing what I was previously and just quickly share this screen for you guys.
Yeah, if anybody wants to learn more, David, like I said, has an amazing blog for entrepreneurs. So, you know, definitely go check that out.
Yeah, and in particular, the place that I would would suggest people go to is this particular page. It's called Matrix Growth Academy. And really, I talk a lot about that 9-step model that we went through there. There's a lot of material here on the building of a sales team. There's the SaaS metrics, the CAC and LTV stuff that we talked about, the SaaS cash flow trough. And then things like what's the role of a CEO. So a single page there with a whole bunch of very small, short, broken down videos, like 10-minute videos on each of these little topics, might be a really helpful next step if people found this of any value to learn more.
Oh, it's perfect. I went through those videos and I definitely learned a lot. It's very inspiring.
Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on. That was very mind blowing. Some of those predictions of the future, stuff that we have never thought about before. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really nice to meet both of you again. And actually, Nick, great to see you again. Nick, nice to meet you, Dane. And hopefully this is helpful. And it's always a pleasure to try and help younger entrepreneurs.